All right, so we're towards the end of the lectures on loops. In fact, this part of the lecture, I'm not going to be teaching anything new. Nested loops basically means having a loop inside of another loop, which is not a new concept. It's a little bit complicated. You need to get experience with it because each loop is doing its own thing. And when they're inside of another loop, then it's going to be a little tough to keep track of. But you already have all the tools. You already know exactly how different loops work, so you shouldn't have any problems with it. Moreover, the concept of loops is a mathematical concept. So it's not necessarily programming. I mean, we have programming constructs to represent loops, but it's pretty much mathematical. So you just really have to keep track of the counters for each loop and how everything is being counted. So you can have any type of loop inside of any other type of loop. So you can have a for loop inside a while loop and vice versa and what have you. Again, these tools are in your hands and you get to you get to use them where you see it's appropriate. The important thing to realize is that nested loops are typically used for 2D structures, meaning whenever you want to draw something in 2 dimensions, you would use nested loops. And this is going to become more apparent as we go through the course. For example, nested loops are used mostly for data in tables as rows and columns. We're going to learn about arrays, and we're going to look at 2-dimensional arrays, which are going to be pretty similar to the Excel sheets you look at. And for that, you need loops. The processing across columns is used by one loop, and basically the row is used by another. Each row is processed similarly to the design at the beginning. So you need to design it from the beginning. After writing a loop to process a generalized row, that loop called the inner loop is placed inside an outer loop. So you're going to have an inner loop and you're going to have an outer loop. And I'll show you what that is like. Let's turn this on. All right. So generally, this here is, let's go back. So the stuff in red denotes the outer loop. So right over here, that's the outer loop. And this here, so the outer loop goes from this brace to the other. So this is the inner loop. And this is the outer loop. So you can do a lot of fun things with these. So this is actually going to be a pretty fun lecture because we already know all the tools and now we're going to use it to do cool things. Basically, imagine if you are programming a robot to put exam papers in a classroom. So if you look at a classroom, you're basically going to have all these desks, right? And then you're going to have more desks, sort of like that. So generally, if you only want your robot to put exam papers on the front row, then you only need one loop, because you would tell your robot, start from row, so your initialization is going to be start from row 0 and go all the way to row 3. So if this is 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you say go start from 0, initialization, go to row 3, that's your test. So you would say 4, int I equals 0 and I less than 3 and I plus plus. So basically for each of them, maybe place an exam on the desk. And they would do that. They would put an exam over here. But if you wanted to say, okay, now do this for each row. So now that you've done it, now you need to go. So this was row 0. This is row 1. This is row 2. And you have, further rows. Let's say in this case, you have row 3. In this case, then you want to say, this is going to be your inner loop, right? And your outer loop is actually, so let me erase these so I can have some room. So so your outer loop is basically going to be for j, so let's say int j equals 0, j is less than, oops, sorry, I made a mistake here. This should be less than 4, right? Because there are 4. So this is less than 3, j plus plus. One thing I miss about lecturing is that I don't have all of you in class telling me when I when I write something incorrect. But do email me if there are any small mistakes like this in the lectures. But yeah, this is supposed to be 4 because there were 4. So here so in this case, we are basically going to, for each row, this is row 0, row 1, and row 2, the robot is going to go to each row and place a paper on each exam. That's how you would program that robot. If there was only one row, if none of these was here, if there was only one row, then you only would need one loop. But since you have multiple rows and multiple columns, it's a 2D structure. You see there are 2 dimensions to it. If you are ever trying to do a 3D plot, then you're going to need 3 loops inside of one another. So you guys are doing statics, the x direction and the y direction, you would need 2 loops to access those matrices. If you had a 3D data, then you would need 3 loops, right? But in this course, we're pretty much going to stop at the 2D structures. So let's write a simple program with this. So if I have for int I 0, I is less than, I'm just going to say 4, and then I plus plus, so this is going to be my outer loop. And then I'm going to have an inner loop. So in here I would say 4, so I need another counter. Int j to be, let's just say, less than 4, and j plus plus. And I'm going to say in this case, I would like to print out star. So what happens is, this here is the inner loop, right? So what happens is this loop, every time you're in this loop is going to print out 4 stars. And then we're going to go back to the top and get another 4 stars. And so by the end that this is done, I'm basically going to get 16 stars in a line. If I want to have a shape, such as a square, then I would actually put a println over here. So I would put a println, and this is going to cause indentation in the drawing of the stars. So this is in the console, right? In the console, this thing is actually going to print structure such as this. A 4x4 square. That's how it's going to be printed. So let's actually go through the memory of this and let's see what happens. And I showed you what the picture is going to look like. I'm just going to erase it, and then I'm actually going to draw it. So this is memory. And then I'm going to tell you what's going on in the output. So in the first 4, what actually happens is that we're going to have 4, the outer loop, and then we have I, which start off as 0. Okay, then right away we're going to have our inner loop, which has j, which start off as 0. Okay, now we're going to say print star. So star is printed, and then remember j++ happens here, right? So j is going to become 1. When it becomes 1, it's still less than 4, so another star is created. Then j is going to become 2, another star is created. Then it's going to become 3, another star is created. And then it becomes 4. When it becomes 4, j is no longer less than 4, right? So because j is 4 as well. So this thing is actually going to be erased from the memory. We're going to come here and we're going to print ln. So we're going to go to the next line and we're going to basically wait there. And I is incremented by 1. So I will become 1. Then we go back to the top. 1 is less than 4. So we come down here, and another time we have the inner 4 made for us. Then j starts off being 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So you're going to get another 4 stars here. Then again, when j is 4, this loop again dies. We get another println printed, and we go back to and I becomes 2. Then we go back to the top. So 2 is still less than 4. So this thing happens a couple more times until we get our square shape. So this is basically how this works. And you have the inner loop. For every iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop goes its entire course. So every time for every I, j goes from 0 to 4, and that's how you move through these loops. let's do a quick problem together. So what if, and actually let's quickly do that on processing. So let's start processing, and you guys should program with me, because this portion of the lecture is sort of half lecture, half tutorial. So maybe pause the video, start up processing, and let's program something together. I would like to program this shape. So I want to actually program a bit of a triangle here. And the reason for this is, so you see there's a bit of a trend here, right? So in all these 2D shapes, you guys have to look for the trend that exists. And so the trend here is, if this is I, so if this is the number of rows, so you have so it starts with, this is row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 3. And this here, so these are rows, columns, let's just put, we have column 0, column 1, column 2, and column 3. So then how this follows is that for row 1, only you have, for row 1, only 1 star is printed. For row 2, you have 2 stars printed. For row 3, you have 3 stars printed. And for row 4, the fourth row rather, you have 4 stars printed. So you need to look at what is basically causing that, and how to set this up. So basically, if I had 4 int I is 0, and I less than 4, because we want to have 4 rows, and I plus plus, that's the outer loop. And then we want to have the inner loop, so int j less than 4, let's say, and then j plus plus. Okay, let's see, let's go up here, and we're going to say print star, and we have a println. So that's what's going to get our sort of a square that we had printed at the bottom over here. Now, if I want to make this into a triangle, the limits are what I need to be looking at, right? Basically, in here, I say for every row, draw 4 stars. But if I want to go ahead and say for every row, draw a certain number of stars. So if I want to say for row 1, only draw 1 star. For row 2, draw 2 stars, and so on and so forth. I would need to change these limits. So this here and this here is what you need to change. So here, if I said, what do I need to say in order for it to draw relative number of stars, not a fixed amount of stars? So the only thing relative is I. So if I said, as long as j is less than and equal to I, let's see what happens. And you see, because this is drawn as a perfect triangle. So let's go through this and let's try to draw the memory diagram of this. So I'll put them side by side here. So in this case, if I have so this is the outer 4, and we're going to have I, which is set to 0, and then the inner 4 is going to have J, which is also set to 0. So here we are saying that if J is less than or equal to I, J is 0, so it is less than or equal to I, so we're going to print 1 star, we're going to print 1 star, and J is going to become 1. Now, if we try to go back up here, if we go back up, we're going to say J is less than or equal to I. No, I is 1, so then this loop is no more, and we're going to increment I by 1. So I is 1 now, and we're going to go in this loop one more time. We're going to have J starts at 0. Okay, J starts at 0. Is 0 less than or equal to I, which is 1? It is. And don't forget, we have the print ln, so we're actually down here. So couple of, and so we go and J becomes 1. We go back up. 1 is less than or equal to 1. True, so we do another, and J becomes 2. And then we say print ln again. We come down here, and I changes to 2. So when I changes to 2, next time 3 stars are drawn. And then the next time after that, 4 stars are drawn, and then the loop stops. And that's how we would draw that. So as a challenge to you, and these challenges are really important because they'll tell you at what level you are at. At a challenge to you, you should go ahead and draw this shape now. So it's a backward right triangle. So you should try drawing that, and if you can draw that, that means you're in a good shape. Basically, you need to play around with, actually, you need to play around with these limits and also the iteration. So sometimes instead of J++, you should have J minus minus. So the direction and the limits of these videos, of these videos, of these variables is what you need to play with. All right, so there is one more example that I want to show you. Actually, first let's go to the slides. So if you go through my slides, I have a bunch of other examples. So I have an example, I have this exact same example that we did, but using while loops rather than for loops. Here I have a couple of while loops again, so nested while loops, and we are drawing a 2D picture of the alphabet rather than stars, and this is using chars and plus plus. So go through that, please. The same thing using for loops. This is a problem that I'm actually going to have you guys perhaps complete for an in-lab exercise. So go through this as well. This is something that you should also consider working on. And then I want to get to this. So I want to finish this lecture with explaining 2D loops for the purpose of drawing. I'm sure you know already that the output of processing is not the console. The console is really there to provide you with debugging capabilities. So if you want to see what your program is doing, what is inside of a certain variable, then you would make use of the print and println. The processing language is really meant to create smart drawings and basically drawings using the window that pops up. So let's do that. Let's start turning our attention in creations of drawings. So let's say if you have size 500 by 500, and I'll say int I. Let's start it at 100. I less than 400, and we'll increase I each time by, let's say, 20. Then we're going to have the inner loop, so int j less than 400 again, and also j we're going to say plus equal 20. Okay, so with this I don't really need to go to a new line. If I want to draw an ellipse, let's say ellipse, and I'll just say I and j, and I'll put the size of the ellipse as, let's draw it a circle, so I'll do 20 20. Let's see what this shape actually looks like. Okay, it's taking a little bit. Actually, is it down here? All right, let's run this again. So we have a compilation error, and I have made a very bad mistake of putting commas instead of semicolons. Again, I'm sure if you guys were here and I was doing a lecture, you'd be screaming at me. So let's run it now. All right, this is what we get. The circles are really sort of compact. So if I want to if I want to change the sizes a little bit, so like if I want to change these size to let's say 15, for instance, this is what I'll get. There's going to be a little bit of space between them. So because this is drawing and I'm drawing I and j, you notice that I don't need to do println anymore, right? I don't need to do println because I and j are being kept track of. Again, if I want to make it into a rectangle, remember before I did this, so I said I less than and equal to j. Let's see if this works. What's going on? Oh, shoot. This is supposed to be I. All right, now it's backwards. Why is this backwards? You should do the memory diagram on this and figure out why it's backwards. But if I want to change this here, if I exchange the rate that I and j are being incremented, so if I keep this, if I make this into a j and this into an I and run it, then you see the triangle forming the way we want it to.